Welcome to Sharpen Your Chess Tactics. This is a series where you can improve your pattern recognition, calculation, and thought process by solving tactical positions and then comparing your analysis with mine. Okay, chess fans, here is this week's position. Take some time and try to solve it, and then compare your analysis to mine. Okay, now I hope you've had a chance to look at the position, and let's take a look together. Upon the initial assessment, here's a few things you might have noticed. First, the biggest thing is that the queen is on pre here on h6, and looks like black doesn't have a queen, which means white just captured it, and white just capture it in this position. And although you might be drawn to automatically recapturing the queen, you might also have noticed a pair of hanging rooks, which are being forked by this knight, as well as the king position here, um, where a knight check on f2 um, can be delivered, perhaps before capturing the queen. So that's definitely something we want to take a look at. And one other element that might have attracted your attention is this advanced pawn here, which has a potential to promote with check. So again, these are things that we might have noticed when we first assessed the position. So we might want to check if there's any winning combinations based on these elements um, before we just recapture this queen. In this case, we're actually down a pawn and a queen. So although taking the queen is definitely something that we want to fall back on, with all of these other factors, we should at least look to see if we have anything better. Since a few of our candidates deliver check, we can examine them as in-between moves because we can always capture the queen afterwards. So this would include e1 equals queen check or e1 equals rook check, as well as knight to f2 check. So let's take a look at e1 equals queen check. Okay, um, e1 equals queen check, and pretty much rook takes e1 is forced. Knight takes f2 check, king to g2, and now we can take the queen. G takes h6, and king takes f2. We could also probably just grab this rook or this pawn on c5, and we can now assess this position. We see that we have an exchange, a rook for a knight, in exchange for a pawn. So basically he has 4 pawns, we have 3 pawns, but we have the exchange. So this is probably better for black, although we should see if we can do better. But we can keep this in our back pocket knowing that it at least is not losing and perhaps gives us a little bit of an edge. So let's go back. Now let's take a look at the other in-between candidate, which would be knight takes f2 check. Okay, knight takes f2, check, king to g2. Again, king to g1 probably works too, but this way it prevents any more knight checks. G takes h6, king takes f2, and now we can grab this pawn, rook takes c5, and then king takes e2. And this is probably a good place to evaluate the position. We reach a very similar position with this in-between move as we did when we promoted the pawn. We could say they're probably pretty equivalent. If we looked a little further, we might prefer this position a little bit more, just because after a move like rook to h5, the king is further away and cannot protect us, so it would force the white rook into a more passive position. And then we could go further with something like rook to h3, which is gets to be a little tough for white. So this is almost again the same evaluation in terms of the material in exchange for a pawn, but we're seeing here that maybe with the rook activity, we're almost winning a pawn. So we're up nearly a clean exchange. So this is definitely a decent candidate to take a look at. Now, before we pick this move, we need to go back and take a look at recapturing the queen. And the idea here is that um, we need to look to see if taking the queen first gives us anything better, because we already see that rook takes f2 check and even e1 equals queen check give us decent positions, if not winning positions. And so if the best we could get out of capturing the queen is to be down a pawn, then we can reject that. However, because it is a queen, we should just take a look and see if there's any forced sequence of moves that doesn't give us a better evaluation than winning the exchange. Um, so let's take a look. G takes h6, and the most natural move I think is rook takes e2 to um, stop this pawn promotion. Also, it gets this rook out of being captured with check. Now, one thing to note here, and this is just something I learned a long time ago, and many of you may know this already, is that because these rooks are forked, um, we don't always need to rush to win the exchange in this case, meaning that they'll still be forked after we capture the queen, and so we're going to win the exchange in any case, or at least the exchange. In this case, because of this pawn, the rook can't go back to protect the other rook with, say, rook f to f1, because obviously it would just get captured by the pawn. So rook to e2, or rook takes e2, and then knight takes c1, which attacks this rook, and it looks like we've just won a rook. So this looks pretty good. To be more as thorough as possible, we just need to make sure that this knight isn't going to get um, trapped somehow because it's in white territory. So there's two moves here we need to look at. We need to look at moves that get this rook out of the gaze of the knight, as well as perhaps attacking the knight. So two moves do that: rook to e1 and rook to c2. So let's take a look at rook to e1. And here we see that black can actually play a move like knight to d3 to escape. Um, Perhaps he could play something like knight takes a2 as well, but knight to d3 is sufficient. Rook to e3. Notice that he can't play rook to d1 here because of this fork. So rook to e3, and then knight takes c5. And here we can see that black is up a whole rook, well, a rook for a pawn, which is better than the exchange. Okay, let's look at the last move here, which is rook to c2. And again, we could play knight to d3, and we have to also just be careful of counterattacking chances like knight to d6. But after rook takes c5, I think it's pretty clear that there's no threats here against the king um, that we need to worry about. So, with that in mind, I think we can make our assessment that g takes h6 is superior. Let's go back to the um, beginning of the problem here. And again, we examined three candidates: e1 equals queen check, knight takes f2 check, and g takes h6. However, we noticed although rook takes f2 check looked to be pretty good by winning the exchange, g takes h6 actually wins a rook for a pawn, as well as a little initiative and being able to attack the other pawn. So we might be up a whole rook after that line. So the solution is g takes h6, rook takes e2, knight takes c1. And we could see that, and we discovered, or we examined to make sure that black's knight uh, couldn't be trapped. And with that, we can choose g takes h6 as our solution. So there are a couple instructive points that I just want to mention before ending this video. So we saw that although the first move, the actual solution, was probably the first move we looked at, Because of the other elements in the position, the hanging rooks, the forked rooks, as well as the advanced pawn, we needed to check to see if there was anything that would deliver an immediate win, either in a huge material gain or checkmate. The other point to remember is that to know when to cut off your search for candidates. For example, in this case, because um, the, those in between moves didn't deliver an immediate win, we could look back at recapturing the queen and just examining that to see which of those three moves would have been the best. Partly because we saw that the other two moves did give us an edge. Finally, after examining the candidates that show promise, we needed to just eliminate that fallback move to check, the G takes H6. We just needed to make sure that that wasn't actually the best move by digging a little deeper. And in this case, that digging uncovered that the best move was G takes H6. And we were able to reason that taking the queen was the best candidate. Finally, just one thing I wanted to note, and when I first saw this position, was that sometimes we get the tendency to get attracted to what I call shiny objects in chess. We might have gotten so excited by the chance to play that in between check, the rook takes f2, um, that we might have chosen to do that. And it does win the exchange. However, it shortcuts our reasoning and our logical assessment of the position. And sometimes our tactical pattern recognition, although it helps us a lot, it can get us into trouble because we see the tactic and we want to play it right away. But in this case, um, it wouldn't be too bad. But as we saw from our analysis, that taking the queen first was actually the best move and gave us a very clear and fairly straightforward way to win the game. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please press the like button if you did, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for future videos. The Sharpen Your Chess Tactics series come out on Tuesdays, and on Thursdays I alternate between beginner videos and intermediate and advanced material. Good luck in your chess games, and see you soon.